All right, welcome everybody. It's really Thursday, right? Because like yesterday I wasn't sure, and then today I thought it was Friday, and I think I've been like skipping over Thursdays for the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, me too. Been fighting the head again.
Oh,
With I don't know if you saw that lidocaine bottle I posted on Facebook. Been treating it with a 2% lidocaine solution shot into both my
oh
nostrils.
my word.
It actually helps when they aren't as bad, but yeah, I had to make sure I didn't do that too close to showtime, or else I would be sniffling throughout this whole thing. So,
Oh, like a club goer in Miami in the 80s.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, I get a
But
hold of some laudanum. I heard that did good for a lot of people back in the day.
oh, absolutely. But yeah, it is Thursday and we are here.
We are here and we're doing this thing. And, um, oh, yeah, we got to put the warning up. Dun dun dun.
Yeah, we absolutely do for this one.
We have some graphic content today and graphic descriptions and images and really, really bad stuff. So be warned.
Yeah,
If you don't like graphic stuff, go somewhere else.
yeah. And I think we should explain why that graphic stuff is important
Mm-hmm.
for for the subject
It's
that we're
not
tackling today.
gratuitous.
Right. This is very pivotal to understanding some very important issues and movements in American history that have lasted for, well, beyond 65 years. Although the murder and the graphic acts that we'll be talking about tonight were 65 years ago this August. Um, and
Wow. Yeah.
yeah, 65 years ago. And it rocked the world with this because the people who perpetrated those acts against a teenage boy who really did nothing to deserve them, nothing at all,
Yeah.
they got off. Our court system let them off. So, um, but it's important going into this to also set the scene of the Mississippi Delta, right? I don't know how many people listening have been there.
I have not.
I've been through a good bit of it when I sold for our family company over the road. In fact,
Okay.
been through most of it, and the food is just delectable. Oh my! I mean,
If you like, you know, bugs.
well, Southern style barbecue
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
and
And
a
by bugs, I
big
meant crawfish.
and a big thing. There's also tamales that are wrapped in corn husks
Yeah,
and dipped with a brand
yeah,
of hot sauce.
yeah, tamales.
Yeah, they are just amazing. But the actual geographic area that we're talking about here,
Mm-hmm.
defined strictly, stretches 250 miles from the lobby of Memphis's Peabody Hotel to what's called Catfish Row in Vicksburg, Mississippi, on the
Literally from the
Mississippi
lobby
River.
of the hotel, literally.
Yes, that is how they consider it, and that is
Not the
because
street out front, but the lobby.
the lobby, and that's because of the floodplain
Okay.
through there. It has a tendency to flood just like everything else. But it stretches 250 miles down to Vicksburg on the Mississippi River. It's about 80 miles wide. It's the Mississippi River to the Mississippi River in the west to the hill country in the east. And that area back then in 1955 was populated with both blacks and whites, and it had a tendency to be the more virulently racist area of the state because the whites and the people of color were competing for economic opportunities more stiffly, I guess you could say,
Hmm.
in that area of the state versus when you get closer to the river. But there's a blog that's absolutely fantastic out there called Where's Pierre? I'll post that source if I get a chance, but he describes the area as a pancake flat alluvial floodplain. And it's also, in his words and the words of quite a few historians, the quote, most southern place on earth. Yeah,
Interesting.
I mean, it
Interesting.
really is, but the South is varied, uh, as anybody who's traveled through it will tell you, because you have, Louisiana French and Cajun people when you get into that area, and then you get into places like, South Carolina, North Carolina, all the way to Texas, that constitutes the South. It's not a monolith, put it
Well, yeah.
that way.
What is really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But most of the towns going through there today are basically ghost towns, boarded up now,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, we have quite a few shots of that will become more pivotal when we get into Emmett.
Right.
But a lot of that was from mechanization, increased mechanization, and the effects of the Industrial Revolution and the prosperity after both World Wars. Um, you had this is also cotton country for the
Right.
most part. Cotton is king in this area, and
Well, and
when
especially after what World War II, when cotton picking became mechanized and
yes,
not manual labor.
precisely, you had machines that had one operator, and it could do the work of literally 600 men
Yeah.
out in the field. So a lot of lost jobs there, but it was also the time of what was called the Great Migration that people might have heard about in, your civics or American history class, where a lot of people of color fled from the South to Chicago for the most part,
Right.
and the North.
And why
Um,
wouldn't you? I mean, come on.
yeah, yeah. And it's important to point out that during this time and in 1955, even in Chicago, the schools were segregated and the neighborhoods were segregated. But they still had they had so much more freedom there than they did in the South
Mm-hmm.
because of this social system surrounding, Jim Crow and white people and black people. I mean, people of color would literally have to get off the street if there was particularly a white woman coming towards them. They could not share a sidewalk or else they would get slapped,
Yeah.
in essence. But, this is also the area of the Delta Blues. It's the area of, in fact, the Money Road, which gets way more important because the town where all this happened is Money, Mississippi. And in fact, the Money Road is about 10 paved miles from Greenwood, Mississippi to Money, Mississippi along another river that winds through there, the Tallahatchie.
Tallahatchie. Now that does sound familiar, and I've never
It
been to
does.
Mississippi.
It does. People listening will hopefully know that from Bobby Gentry's. folk song about Billy Joe taking a jump off the
Billy
Tallahatchie
Joe
Bridge.
McAllister.
Yep. And in fact, I posted it on our page, I think. Um, so you can hear it. A live performance of her doing that.
Yeah, I did.
But
I watched that video. She's cute.
she is a beautiful lady in that.
Yeah.
But the bridge that inspired that song is in Money, Mississippi, where Emmett Till was killed. And this is also, and I found this more interesting as somebody who loves the blues.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of my favorite types of music and just loves the history of it. That's kind of what I was reared on before I heard a lot of rock and roll, was the blues. Um, Famous blues guitarist and singer Robert Johnson, who allegedly the story is around him that he sold his soul to the devil to learn how to play the slide guitar in the
Ah.
1920s at the crossroads. That crossroads is nearby with Money. It's just a couple of miles away down there. And in fact, he was killed
Wasn't there a
on
song
this
written about
road
that?
to Money. Yep. Probably the most famous version of that, I think, is Cream.
Oh,
Wouldn't you
okay.
say?
Yeah.
Eric Clapton. Yep. But yeah, Robert Johnson was shot on the crossroads. Or on this road, nearby. But another interesting fact about that area, when you get into Clarksdale, Mississippi, one of the cities through there, Morgan Freeman has a blues club down there. He was born in Clarksdale. It's called Ground Zero Club, and it fashions itself after another thing that's really a staple of the culture through there, and that is the juke joint, which it's also a staple of the culture up here, particularly booze, which we talked about it with Prohibition before. It's one name, mostly a southern name, for an unlicensed bar, is technically a juke joint.
Ah. Okay.
Yep. Um, and
But
that's kind of
and I
what.
think we covered this in the prohibition one is that a speakeasy, not all secret bars were speakeasies. A speakeasy specifically had a fake storefront or a real
Yes.
storefront that you had to go through to get to the bar part.
Yep.
It wasn't.
It always had a front.
It always had a front. None of these back alley sliding window things. Hey, Joe sent me kind of stuff.
Hmm.
That's not a speakeasy. You had to go through a store to get to a speakeasy.
Yes. Yeah, with the technical definition of a speakeasy, it has to have a false front with it. But now a juke joint, um, people who haven't been to one, you might just think of it as a dive bar
Right?
that doesn't have a license. Um, but they were known at this time in 1955 for their raucous blues and gaining into rock and roll playing in there, sometimes the entire weekend.
Wow.
And yeah, yeah, and literally in some of them, you would have the preachers would be singing in the blues band. It would be, yeah,
There you
you
go. That's the way to do it.
exactly. You party all weekend and, Sunday morning go to church. That is the culture there. People needed a relief from that. And that's so much of what the men and women of blues music put into their music, too, to get rid of that heartache. They like to party. And I can't
Yeah.
say I have a problem with that.
I think
But
every culture has come around to that point of view at some point or another.
oh, absolutely.
Things are tough. Let's drink.
Yeah, yeah. Drink and dance to some awesome music. blues starting it out and getting into R&B and then ultimately rock and roll with it. But yeah, money, if we could pull up the map to show people where it is technically.
Which map?
Oh, do we have one that I think I sent one that actually shows where the town of Money is. Did
I
I?
don't know. No, sir, you did not.
Okay. Never mind with that. Let's bring up the other map, the lynching maps. Either one of them's fine. It, that's the other thing that was occurring at this time. And lynching statistics only started off actually being kept in 1882. But the total of that gets to about 4,400.
Okay, so just looking at this map, the South is a problem child.
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Come on, people.
Yeah.
Come
Oh, yeah.
on.
Yep. The South has always kind of been a problem child, but yeah, absolutely. That's where they were concentrated. This one is from the Smithsonian. And that, or was this
No,
one
this
from
one's
Penn
Penn.
State?
This one's Penn.
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't make a whole lot of difference
No.
because both of our sources are good on this. Um, yeah, I mean, you had about 4,400 lynchings and about 500 of people of color in Mississippi alone.
So let's bring up the Smithsonian one because this one doesn't go all the way to the north. At least not in the northwest and northeast. But what's
Hmm.
really weird about this is this cluster of Chinese murders around western Wyoming.
I wish they gave dates
I
for
mean,
them.
what would that be? Laramie or something like that?
I would think so.
And it's like, what? And I gotta think, has to do with the railroad.
Yeah,
I would think so.
it most likely with that, or maybe a military fort being built. I don't know.
Yeah, it's curious, and that's quite a cluster.
Yeah, I mean that really is, and there's nothing out there
No,
in Wyoming.
no, no.
It's just nothing.
It is an entire
But
state of rural.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, about 4,400 of them for the
That's
statistics. 4,400 total in both the north and the south.
yeah.
Um,
It's. I'm surprised to see these clusters around the Great Lakes
hmm
that far
Well,
north.
those were more than likely. I mean, there's been quite a bit of race rioting up around Detroit and Chicago.
Yeah.
Really doesn't surprise me so much. Um, I guess of the time period, maybe, but
Well, I
still.
mean, it does go. This one does go up through 1964, so there were
hmm
a lot of
That one,
problems.
I think the difference with the date there is equated to about 1,000 people is who were added
Mm.
between 1964 and today with the lynching statistics. But um, yeah,
And should I would like to know by lynching they don't necessarily mean hanging, or do
um,
they specifically mean hanging?
that is a good question. I should look up a technical.
Because some people use the term lynching to mean any racially motivated murder,
Let's look up the
but that
legal definition, which a lynching. Oh wait, that's crap. Well, that's the Encyclopedia Britannica says it's a mob. In
Oh,
order for it to be a lynching, it has to be a mob under
okay.
the pretext of, justice without trial. And that's another important thing to get into with that. With many of them with people of color, it was black men who had been accused of what's called miscegenation or race mixing. Basically, a made up word by racist Southerners at that time,
Hmm.
miscegenation. But
If you want to hear a modern usage, or I mean, a modern usage of that word from back in the 100 years ago, "Oh brother, where art thou?" They use that term in the KKK scene.
oh yeah, they do.
Yeah,
And the black guitarist in that movie, when they talk about him selling his soul to the devil,
right,
that was from Robert Johnson.
right.
I forgot about that.
Funny movie.
That is a great one. I usually can't stand George Clooney as an actor, but he was excellent in that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in Money, there lived a man by the name of Mose Wright. He was 64. He was he's a black man. He's a former sharecropper and a preacher. And he had, a few kids, and they lived in a small 3-bedroom house, which I'm pretty sure we sent a pic of that. We can pull up if we like.
Yeah, I do not. Let's see. Let me add old. I have him added into a slideshow, so let me add him.
Um, he will be very important to this story because he is the uncle of Mamie Till. That's Emmett's mother. She was brought to Chicago during the Great Migration when she was 2. And she was a really impressive woman. And she was the first in her class in her high school up there. And she was one of the first African American women to get a civil service job in the city of Chicago. Um, but she is a very driven, you know, very respected women up
And there's
there.
Mose during the trial.
Yes, which we will get to. Um, but she got up there when she was 2, and she ultimately met and fell in love with a soldier by the name of Lewis Till, which he'll be important when we get back around to after the
Okay.
trial. He served in the Second World War, and he died in 45 in Italy. And the only possession that was sent back of his was a signet ring with LT monogrammed on it. So they know it's his. And I think there might have been a date too, but anyway. Um, Mose, he took the train up to Chicago. It only cost $1.10 for one way at that time.
Nice.
And he was hanging out with, Emmett and the family up there and everybody. And he invited him. He said, you should come down to Mississippi because Emmett had never been to, the Delta region. He should see it while he's,
Yeah.
while he's young.
And how
Go
old
back
is
to the region of your birth.
how old is Emmett at this point?
He is, I believe, 13 at this time.
Okay.
A buddy of his in a documentary I was watching told a rather funny story about him and Emmett when they were in gym class together in Chicago. Emmett, you remember the truffle shuffle from the Goonies?
Yeah.
Emmett lifts his shirt up and starts basically doing that in the middle of gym class to make everybody laugh. And he was about 13 at that time. He was a kid who was known for he's headstrong. He's a natural leader. He actually paid people to tell him jokes that he could pass on later.
Oh, interesting.
Um, and a lot of this resulted from the childhood polio that he had. And he actually had a stutter throughout most of his life from the polio, with particular trouble saying the letter B, which will become important later on when he takes the trip to Mississippi. But yeah, Mamie said to Mose, yeah, let's send him down. And before she did that, she schooled Emmett on the ways of the South. It is, it's yes, sir, and no, ma'am. And you need to get out of their way. And she even said, if a white person asks you to kneel and beg forgiveness, you do it without a second thought. Was her words down there.
Mm.
And probably the best way to sum up that whole social system, the quote that I saw was, if a white person did something to you, you had no recourse at all, legally. And quite often with the lynchings, people would just disappear, too.
Well, unless you hold on, let's do this. Unless you pose for
Yeah.
cameras.
Yeah, there's Mose. That is not Emmett. I'm not sure who that is on his lap. But that is Mose sitting in his chair. There's Emmett. Probably the most famous picture of him, besides the second one that we're
Yeah.
going to show. The one that we put up the warning about. But
I mean,
yeah,
this is astonishing that you can not just murder somebody, but then stand by him and get your picture taken, and nothing happens.
oh yeah. And do you have the other pictures that were related to that one?
Yeah, they'll be coming in the
Okay.
slideshow here in a sec.
Pay attention to that in the slideshow because the photographer steps back with that. I'm pretty sure it was the same one. And
Yeah. There's
the
another view of that same shot
yep,
coming up.
the hanging monuments is the lynching museum
Wow.
down there in Mississippi. But yeah, I mean, she said you can go, you can get there, and it dropped him off at the train, and said, Emmett, give me a kiss goodbye, and he was kind of, shrugging it off, being the headstrong little guy that he was, saying, "Yeah, Mom, I'll see you again." And she said, "Nope, you're gonna kiss me before you go." So they did that, and she ended up giving him his dad's ring, and he ended up giving her his watch at the train station.
Hmm.
With all that, he said, "I ain't gonna need that where I'm going."
There's that wider view.
Oh crap, mine's at a bit of a delay, I think. Yeah, there we go. I see it now. That is, yeah, it's sick. You know what it reminds me of? One of my favorite short stories, Shirley Jackson's The Lottery.
Mm. Yeah, except that in that story, the whole community agreed to go along with it,
Yeah,
which is not the
yeah,
case in the South.
yeah.
Or
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There wasn't the racism in
right.
her story. But yeah, it reminds me of that just because of the community aspect. But yeah, and on a late day in August, he hopped the train and took the 16-hour ride down to Money, basically a whistle stop. There's only one street in that entire town with maybe 5 or 6 stores.
Wow.
And one of them we have a picture from 1955 and then one from today. One of the stores was called Bryant's Grocery, run by a guy by the name of Roy Bryant, 24 years old. He fought in World War II, and he's card-carrying KKK, of course. And his wife, Carolyn Bryant.
Oh, the grocery store. There we go.
Yeah. Which the Bryants didn't have much beyond the grocery store. They were poor. They lived in I think maybe a 2-room shack behind the store. And that was basically all they did. They sold candy to the local black kids and then provisions to the field hands with that.
Yeah, this is not a going concern.
Yeah, exactly. And they had a, man, what was his familial relation? Brother-in-law.
Yeah.
That was it. J.W. Milam. He's about 6'4", weighs 235 pounds. He served in the Second World War as well, actually won a couple of medals. And, I didn't see any verification of it, but I think it would be a fair assessment to say he's likely Klan as well. I didn't see if he was in the KKK, but...
Well, he didn't, whether he was a card-carrying member or not, he had some really nasty things to say to Look magazine.
Yes, he did. He absolutely positively did with that. But this guy, one thing that he prided himself on was knowing how to treat his words a nigger. Roughing them up when he thought they got in his way. But
yeah, he says, I know how to work them.
Yeah, I know how to work them. Exactly.
Which means beating them.
Yeah, basically. And so Emmett gets to money, and he meets up with Mose and the rest of the family there. And they're picking cotton for about half a day. And it's just so hot, they can't do it for the second half of the day. So a lot of them hop into Moses' old Ford.
Which says a lot because they're used to working in the heat. So
yes. I mean, the Delta is a furnace. A humid furnace. I mean, you are talking about an area that's known for, the humidity, the Spanish moss on the cypress trees.
Right.
And so much with that. But, yeah, they hopped in Moses' car to go to Bryant's Grocery to pick up whatever they wanted to refresh themselves. So they go in there, and it's such a small store that only about one of them at a time could fit to get in there with the aisles. And Mrs. Bryant, Carolyn, was there working the store by herself. Because another thing that J.W. Milam and her husband would often do is trucking. I would assume contract trucking. So they'd be away for days at a time. And they were away at this time, but she thought nothing of it and was working the store as usual. And this is where it gets messy with a lot of it. Because Emmett went in. He bought 2 cents of bubble gum.
Okay.
And got out, according to most of the witnesses. And there were, people playing checkers around the store as well, and others just sort of standing around in the shade because there's not much else you can do.
That's not just something they do in the movies. They actually did that, I guess, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yes. And it's alleged, it's alleged that Emmett did a wolf whistle to Carolyn Bryant as he was going out of the store. But you look at other witnesses with this who say that Emmett was whistling about the checker game.
Oh,
And remember what I said about him using the whistling to cover up his stutter a
yeah,
little bit
yeah,
and him having trouble with the letter B?
yeah.
He bought bubble gum.
Okay.
Maybe asking about it, and that's why he whistled when he was in there.
Mm.
But that is going to change a little bit because Carolyn Bryant's story was to the degree of he came in, he touched my hand and said, "Hey, honey, you want a date?" Basically, he was crude in her words, and then he touched my waist. That was her story.
Now, why would she say that?
We'll get into that.
Because that just seems. Because I'm gonna go with she's fucking lying. but
Well,
but why? What would be the motivation behind that?
you know, I honestly, I don't know, but I do have a theory that we'll get to with the narrative unfolding here a little bit.
All right. Because I
Uh,
I know something about when women lie about inappropriate actions by men. When they lie about that, they are often, well, sometimes they're covering up for something else that they
mm-hmm.
don't want to admit to, or they're offended by someone and they make it worse than it was to get even. And I'm not, I'm only
It
talking about when women are lying about this stuff, not when they're telling the truth. I'm saying when they lie, they have a pattern to it.
it could be.
Now,
Um, Now, at any rate, whatever happened at the store with Emmett and Carolyn, she basically went out of there in a huff, and somebody said she's going to get a pistol.
whoa.
So that's when they got the hell out of
I
there.
mean, right there on the spot. This was not later.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, basically.
that's very curious, isn't it?
Yes. Now, about the kids who were there, because Mose wasn't, it was just the kid cousins, they didn't tell him. They didn't tell Mose about this, about what happened. They thought really nothing of it
Okay.
until she grabbed the pistol and they were driving away. Um, so about
So
3 days
so she was
passed.
really upset on the spot. This was not something that grew over time into a story.
Yeah, yeah, but the other thing with her, I guess we might as well get it out now. Um, she allegedly told her, I think it was her sister in law, a relation at any rate, who was there, about what happened. And she said, "I'm not going to tell my husband." But there were also some white witnesses out there.
Okay.
And the idea is that Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam heard about this from one of them.
Uh,
Perhaps. That would be my theory. And
I,
then maybe she decided to lie to try to reason with or, make sense of her husband's actions.
maybe. And here's something that I know you don't have an answer for this, but it strikes me as extraordinarily strange, and that is the husband's definitely a hyper racist, right?
Basically. I
So
mean,
why are
even
they?
a
Why
lot
is
of
their
the
store
white
in the black
people.
neighborhood?
Yeah,
Why are they catering? Why is their store catering to the black population if they hate them so much?
they're that poor. The Bryants were, basically. I would think would be the answer to that.
It seems very odd to me.
Well, I mean, they could have done something else, but I also know that there's a good deal of the white population who didn't like J.W. Milam and Roy Brown. In fact, the one of the sheriffs down there called him a couple of peckerwoods. That was his word, and it's probably dead on.
Does that have a
Considering
is
these
that a
guys.
does that have a particular meaning in the South besides being like a you know
I'll just say, a drunk white idiot racist,
yeah.
basically. I mean, that's both of those guys. That was his word, in fact. Um, but at any rate, the incident happened on whatever it was, happened on a Wednesday, right? And on a Sunday at 2:30 a.m. in Mose Wright's house, a witness called it black as midnight at that time, and he was in there. They had no lights on. They were all sleeping. His 2 to 3 bedroom home. He gets a knock on his door, and there's 2 men, 2 white men. One of them says, "This is Mr. Bryant. Open up." And one of them has a flashlight and a pistol. And he gets in there, and they're looking for him. He said, in Mose Wright's words, "I'm looking for the one who did the talk at Money." So that leads me to believe as well there wasn't any grabbing.
Because he didn't talk about grabbing.
Yeah, he
Because that
just
would
said,
have
"I'm
been
looking for the one who did the talk," was Moses' words. Um, but, and another thing with that, which we'll get to, because it's not unfolding right quite yet, but he gets in there, and there's, these 2 guys with weapons and a flashlight, and they're looking for the one, and Mose is talking to him, and he's like, he's totally flabbergasted. He doesn't know what's going on, because remember, they didn't tell him
oh
what
right.
happened. He has no idea. And finally, when he figures out or gets an idea of what these 2 Peckerwoods think happened, he starts bargaining with them. And he says, "Just give the boy a whooping and then send him back." And
Trying to
J.W. Milam, in reply to that, says, "How old are you, preacher?" And Mose says, 64. And Milam says, "If you want to live to be 65, you'll leave us alone." So Mose stepped back when they finally found Emmett in bed with his cousin. And they told him to get dressed. They march him outside to a car in, the humid as hell darkness of the Delta. And Mose testified that Milam said out there, "Is this one who did the talk?" to someone else in the car. And Mose couldn't see who it was, but he testified that the voice sounded female. And they did that and took Emmett away, pistol whipping him along the way.
and he's again 13,
14,
14.
but still.
I mean, come
Yeah.
on. How scary
Yeah.
would that be? Somebody
Yeah,
wakes you up in the middle of the night to drag you out at gunpoint.
Yeah. And you later find out this wasn't a 22 or a Derringer. Later find out that it was J.W. Milam's 45.
Ugh.
So that's a big gun.
Yeah, it's a big gun. That's about as big as you can get in a handgun, almost.
Yeah. Yeah, besides the 50 caliber Desert Eagle,
Yeah.
basically. But yeah, they took him and they pistol whipped him. There was one account that said that they got 2 local black guys to help them, but I'm not sure the veracity of that because nobody else really verified it. So I think we could assume it's probably just the two of them who
They
did
wouldn't
that.
need any help unless they didn't know where to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically. They put him in the back of Milan's truck, weighed down under a tarp that was weighed down. Apparently, was how they transported him,
Hmm.
and they got him to Milan's barn, some ways away. And there were witnesses who testified that they heard the sounds of him crying, of somebody crying, somebody being beaten inside that barn. There was a couple of them. Probably one of the more, I think, braver ones was Willie Reed, who we actually had a picture of in the rotation,
Yeah.
who was 18 years old at the time. And he was just walking home when he heard this. And apparently, um, he was walked on and they found him. And he decided, yeah, I'm going to testify at the later trial. But the rest of his life, I think he lived into the 1980s or 90s, he didn't even tell his wife about what went down.
Wow.
And you had another one who was just a kid out there playing, and apparently J.W. Milam came out of the barn and looked at him and said, "You hear anything?" And this witness, he saw the 45 on Milam's hip, and he said, "No, no, sir." But after all of this, when they're torturing him inside this barn, they take him to a curve in the Tallahatchie River, and they affix a 75-pound cotton gin fan using barbed wire around Emmett's neck. They put a bullet from the 45 through his head above the right ear, and they dumped him in the river.
Brave, brave, brave men.
Yeah. Horrible. Absolutely horrible.
Well, I gotta ask this. Judging from the photographs of people posing by the hangings, um, if they had just shot him in the street in broad daylight, would they have been in trouble even for that?
That's a good question because the Look magazine interview that you were talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
where this was after they get off with the trial and they're protected because the Constitution precludes double jeopardy on a crime.
Yeah.
They sold their story to Look magazine for $4,000, basically. And what struck me with it, they were more worried about stealing a $75 fan than what they did to
Wow.
that kid, in my opinion. If you actually read it and look at the excerpts of it,
And they probably thought they were coming off as heroes in this article.
yeah. I mean, here's just one quote from it. This is J.W. Milam speaking to Look that they ran in 1956. "Well, what else could we do? He was hopeless. I'm no bully. I never heard a nigger in my life. I like niggers, in their place. I know how to work 'em. But I just decided it was time a few people got put on notice. As long as I live and can do anything about it, niggers are going to stay in their place. Niggers ain't going to vote where I live. If they did, they'd control the government. They ain't going to go to school with my kids. And when a nigger gets close to mentioning sex with a white woman, He's tired of living. I'm likely to kill him. Me and my folks fought for this country and we got some rights. Asshole.
Yeah.
Peckerwood. Most aptly put. But yeah, it was actually the second day after this, because Mose, that night, he didn't even get to sleep after that. He went out looking for him after about 20 minutes.
Sure.
Looking for Emmett. And of course, he didn't find anything. And after that, he rallied the rest of the family to, look under bridges and look anywhere else that a body basically might be dumped. In his words, where black folk would end up with this sort of thing. And it was about 3 days after when a kid fishing in the Tallahatchie River found him, which it was his foot is caught on a root at that part of the river, and he was sticking out. So they fished the body out, and oh yeah, almost forgot about that.
What's that?
Because they did call the sheriff the day after.
Yeah.
Mose did.
Yeah.
They actually picked up Milam and Roy Bryant for kidnapping the day after. So they had him in jail. But, yeah, and apparently the Milam was in a nearby county, and the sheriff there was going in to get him, and he wasn't going to go peaceably. And this sheriff, he didn't take any shit. Basically drug him out of there and took him to their jail. So, I mean, they got that far, and the kid found him 3 days later, and the body was so badly beaten and decomposed from being in the water that Mose could only identify them by the ring that he had on. His dad's ring.
Yeah.
And it's utterly amazing with that, because it wasn't their default. With a lot of the Southern press, a lot of whites were pissed off that this happened. When they fished him out, they were initially pissed off.
Yeah.
But when the press printed something that they saw as bad about Mississippi with that happening, it sort of made them pivot with how they thought about it. And then you had the same sheriff who drug Milam out, came up with this absolutely absurd idea that somehow the ring was placed by the NAACP and a international communist conspiracy. They colluded to place that ring on this body's hand to make it Emmett Till. And they said Emmett Till was still alive and in Detroit. Which is just...
Like, how would they know?
It's the height of absurdity, but the defense actually ended up using it as one of their planks in their defense of Milam and Bryant.
Really?
Yeah. Which, Mamie Till, when they shipped the body back up to Chicago, the government of Mississippi was trying to say, you need to have a closed casket funeral. And she decided, no. We need to show the world what happened to my kid.
Absolutely.
And those photos, which we have in the rotation,
They're coming
we can
up.
pull them up.
They're starting to come up.
that appeared in publications like Jet and the Chicago Defender, and it after that blew up. I mean, one of them won the Pulitzer Prize, in fact, for photography. You know, when they put it in Time magazine and the international press got wind of it. And it's just amazing, you know.
Well,
She's every mother in that situation.
yeah, I mean, it. One of the things that is, I mean, all of these murders are tragedies, but this one caught fire.
Yes.
Um,
And particularly because of her decision for an open casket, I think,
yeah,
in my opinion.
no doubt.
There's the
But
body
yeah, but
on
here's
there now.
so you know that little girl, English girl who disappeared in Portugal on vacation.
Yeah. What
Um,
was her name?
Maddie, was it Maddie something? Anyway,
Oh, I think so.
um, and some people were, very puzzled by, why this story made the media go nuts and not some other story. I mean, there were local girls who had gone missing and didn't get any attention. And one of the reporters just kind of shrugged and go, it's the circumstances that are the story as much as anything.
Absolutely.
And I think that's true in this case.
They,
Um,
they
I
didn't want
mean,
it to go
there's
unanswered.
4,000 murders. Why this one, right? Well,
Yeah.
it's the circumstances.
Oh, yeah. And it's other things, too, like that photo of Mose. That was during the trial, and he stood up and pointed out J.W. Milam
Hmm.
as the guilty party. And in fact, that photo was one of the black press who sat in there. Of course, they were segregated too, along with everybody
Oh,
else.
for God's
He,
sakes.
he defied the judge's order to take and took that photo. The judge ordered no photography
Ah,
in the courtroom. And I mean, it's amazing, you know. The prosecution, they did their best. They thought they had a solid case throughout most of this, and they did. But getting through this, the defense, um, they whittled away at it, and they even pointed out that there was a $400 insurance policy on Emmett by Mamie.
okay.
And I'm not suggesting anything motive, wise there.
Well, I'm
But
sure the defense did.
oh, absolutely. It was just putting that in people's minds
Right.
sort of made reasonable doubt more of a possibility. I would imagine being a civil service employee with the city of Chicago that she might have got that for her children as a benefit,
Sure.
But she testified and Mose testified, and the courtroom was 118 degrees,
Oh, my word.
packed to, standing room only. In fact, one
Oh, here you can
report,
see in this news clipping, you can see the fan.
yeah, yep. In fact, one reporter who had covered, I think it was Machine Gun Kelly and a couple other big time cases up till that time,
Yeah.
had said he had never seen publicity like he saw the publicity surrounding this trial. And a lot of people of color, I think, just they had had enough at this point. Because, another really important thing that was influencing all of this, Mississippi was a powder keg with Brown v. Board happening,
Oh, yeah.
but not being enforced. the state got, pissy about it, which, I think that both you and I are pro states' rights, but when you get into this bullshit about denying people their individual rights, absolutely the government should step in my opinion.
It is the kind of well, look, I mean, the purpose of government is to protect its citizens, and if the states
Yes.
aren't going to do it, the feds got to do it.
Yes. And that was a one of the major consequences of all of this. It's kind of why Mamie Till called Emmett the sacrificial lamb, in her words,
Mm,
for the civil rights movement, because his murder is what sparked a lot of this.
yes.
Um, and and it turned out with the trial that, of course, they were both found not guilty on the murder charges. A grand jury also later denied the indictment no true bill on the kidnapping charges
Wow.
as well.
Jeez Louise.
But yeah, which is just profoundly fucked up. And when these two realized that they were protected by the double jeopardy clause in the Constitution, they sold their story to Look magazine, and they admitted to the murder.
Yeah, they could have stood up right there in the courtroom and said, "I done did it," and
Well,
it wouldn't have, they couldn't have been prosecuted.
not till they had the verdict in
Yeah,
their
yeah,
favor.
that's what I mean. Afterwards,
Yeah.
after the verdict, they could have just,
Oh,
just stand up
oh
and admit
yeah.
it, and then there's nothing legally that
You
could
mean
be
in the
done.
kidnapping trial? Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. But yeah, they did that, and it was later found out in the early 2000s by a historian who was writing a book on this from, I believe it was Princeton. Uh, he said that Carol Bryant told him in one of the few interviews she ever gave that she lied about basically everything she said regarding Emmett Till.
Yeah, but I there's some dispute on whether she actually did or not.
Yeah, and one of those is because apparently the recording doesn't have
Doesn't
her
include
saying
that.
that.
Yeah.
And I'll be the first to testify to this as somebody who did so many interviews with the 405
Yeah, it
that,
happens.
yeah, sometimes when your equipment goes bad or you have shit equipment and you
Yeah,
can't hear what a person is saying.
right.
And I can't say that I totally trust her daughter-in-law who said that she never said those things,
Because was she
because
there?
apparently she was,
Mm. But
and that's what she said. But
and
she would have a motive to lie.
we still get back to the concept of motive. All right, so
Yeah,
let's say she did lie. Why?
yeah.
And why him? Of all some kid she'd never seen before.
The only the only remotely possible or remotely probable reason I can think of that even makes a little bit of sense to me is that she did it as a way, sort of ad hoc, after her husband did what he did, and she thought, oh, I had to make this worse. I had to make what actually happened sound
To
worse.
justify it.
Yeah, that's the only thing I could think of. I mean, I would be
Well,
open to
I mean,
other
but
thoughts
she
on
was
that.
pissed off, in real time too, according to the witnesses. I mean, they skedaddled out of there because she was mad at him.
Going to get a pistol, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously she was upset about something.
And maybe she took him whistling at the checkerboard as a
Mm.
wolf whistle at her. In either way, it doesn't justify what happened to
No,
him, but
not in any way.
even Carolyn Bryant admitted that. And by the way, her testimony when the jury trial was happening with her husband was taken separately from the court. She was basically sequestered and grilled
Really?
by the attorneys. Yeah. And then I would assume they just read it into the record with the trial.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, that she would testify at all, because she wouldn't have to.
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, in fact, the prosecution said that what she had to say about this was immaterial. In fact, um, to what's happening.
Hmm.
And that was one of that comes to another thing. The prosecution later realized that one of their biggest mistakes with this trial was blackballing any white person on that jury. It was all white men, of course. But they blackballed any white person on that jury who knew J.W. Milam or Roy Bryant.
You mean
And
they excluded him? They used an exclusion to keep him off the jury?
yes, and the reason that they later decided that was a mistake is because they later found out that most of the white people
Didn't like
who knew
him?
these guys, didn't like them. So they kind of fucked up on that.
That's, I mean, that's a little funny that you make an assumption that if you know him, you like him, but that's not always the case.
Yeah, yeah. I
Y-
mean,
So, one of the things I wanted to cover on this, um, at some point, we don't have to do it here, but maybe in a minute or two, but there's a connection between lynchings and the death penalty in
oh,
my
is
mind.
there?
Well, in my mind, and that is they often get the wrong person.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or at least there's a very high probability
There's a very high
that they will.
probability that that whoever is being the vigilantes they get it wrong.
Yeah. And with the death penalty, it'll be done in your name.
Yeah.
Just like with the mob, if you're not doing anything to help there, it's kind of on you too.
Yeah, if you're
It's
part of
kind of on you
yep.
if you're just watching. I mean, what was it?
If you're contributing to the atmosphere by your presence, then you are contributing to that death.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, what was it? Was it Dante Alighieri or was it Edmund Burke who said that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of crisis do nothing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, that is Bryant Grocery nowadays. The crashed building
Ah.
with the sky behind it. But then you have the signs on the Emmett Till, basically the trail of what happened with him. And then the sign where he was dumped in the river that's riddled by bullets shot at it from Peckerwoods, modern day Peckerwoods.
Yeah. I mean, you go out to any rural area and every sign has bullet holes in it, but that's really unacceptable
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
in
there's
this
that,
case.
and yeah, it's really bad in this case, but there was also another case where they arrested a white supremacist group, I believe it was, for making a propaganda film around there,
Really.
which is kind of weird once you consider the First Amendment. Unless they vandalized the monument too while they were making their propaganda film. So that must have been the basis that they used to arrest him.
So what happened to the Bryants?
Ultimately, you had what happened there with Carol and the historian. I wonder if she is still alive. I'm looking right now because that was only, I think, 2018. Uh,
Interview. Oh wait, she was 72 then,
yeah,
so she'd be 90, 84
if she's still
if she's
alive.
still alive.
By the way, she also lied to the FBI throughout when the FBI took a look at this and then a second look. Although sadly at the time, Eisenhower was in the White House and he declined to look deeper into it
Hmm.
at that time. He even declined Mamie Till's telegram when she sent him one.
Well, that's disappointing.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping. Yeah, she's still alive, I guess. And I think Roy is too, but JW, he was the older one, and I know he died in, I believe, 1983. Probably in obscurity.
Not enough. It
Yeah,
would have been better if nobody ever knew his name, but sadly we do.
sadly indeed. Oh, it looks like Roy died in 1994 in Jackson.
It's so strange to me because I was born and raised in the Seattle area, and I, honest to God, I learned about racism and segregation and all that shit in from school. I mean, I had
Yeah,
no firsthand experience with it at all ever growing up. It was only vicariously through the news and the media and social studies and that kind of stuff. And it's
yeah.
just and so it's just mind-boggling to me that this is even a thing. I don't understand it.
That's the way that it should be. And my closest brush with it undoubtedly was my great grandmother from New Orleans, as I think I've talked about her before. I mean, she definitely, carried a lot of that with her. In fact, when they would play a little bit more upbeat music at the Catholic Church, she would call it her words, nigger, negro music.
Hmm.
But you're talking about a woman who was born in 1909 or 1912, I can't remember which, in Mansura, Louisiana, and basically raised in New Orleans. So,
Yeah, and so the thing about stereotypes are valid when you are looking at groups. They can be very useful when you're talking about groups of people. They're not useful when talking about individuals. So you can say, yeah, the South has a real problem with racism, but that doesn't mean everybody is a racist in the South. And it was never that case, but there were sure a lot of them, enough to make it a valid stereotype of the South.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of that gets back to, Reconstruction and all of that after the Civil War, too. Which, by the way, Mississippi was known particularly for its virulent, I guess you could say,
Hmm.
strain of the Ku Klux Klan. They were particularly violent in that state with their night rides and their lynchings.
That's crazy. The Ku Klux Klan was nearly erased.
Yeah.
Um, and it's funny that the Superman show had something to do with that. The Superman radio show.
Oh, did it?
It did. Um,
I didn't think I know that.
yeah, so there was this guy who thought who was apparently thought that, I don't know, I forget what his original motivation was, but he thought, you know what, this Ku Klux Klan is stupid, and he infiltrated the Ku Klux Klan, and then he would take their secret passwords and their plans and all that stuff to the people writing the radio show, and he would tell
Oh,
it to them, and
nice.
then they'd have Superman battling the Ku Klux Klan using real information and making them sound like doofuses. Well, I mean, how hard
uh,
is that? And
it-
and then they were so ridiculed and humiliated by the Superman show that people just quit in droves.
oh, that's awesome.
I mean, there were people who would say, I can't be in this organization because my kids are playing Superman versus the Klan and making fun of my kids are making fun of the Klan.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah, and then it just made me think of Spike Lee's movie, Black Klansman,
Yeah,
and the cop who infiltrated it. That's actually a really good movie if you haven't seen it.
I haven't.
It plays really well as an action movie.
Cool.
Um, Both John David Washington and Adam Driver, because it was really both of those guys who infiltrated it. Because, of course, the black cop who was the voice over the phone and all that, he needed a white double for physical contact when they infiltrated the Klan.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it was really both of those guys playing one character. But yeah, Mississippi is a weird state.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
definitely
You know,
definitely is.
you don't have to live in the South if you don't want to, people.
No. No, I mean I love the South going through
Do
there.
you?
Oh yeah. I mean
I gotta
there's
say,
so much wrong with it, of course, but all its faults, I love the South. I love the
well,
food, I love the
somebody
music, I
has to.
love the people. Well, most of the people. Um, and
Yeah.
I love, in fact, William Faulkner is one of my favorite writers.
Okay.
So, um, Light in August and As I Lay Dying.
Well, poor little Emmett Till, man. He, of all those thousands of murders, he really, uh, it was not in vain. It, his,
Yeah,
it wasn't worth his death, but his death was not worthless.
yeah, that's very true. And he was essentially the spark that lit the civil rights movement.
Yep.
It's in all these deaths happening today, and political movements like Black Lives Matter. I mean, I agree with him on certain things, like, more liberty for their communities and criminal justice reform. I'm totally with him on that.
Yeah.
But the other stuff, I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. They, be nice if they stopped burning down their neighborhoods
Yeah,
and killing people.
yeah. The cops killing people too. Both sides, but that.
Yeah.
It's a sad situation, and so much of it can be traced back to Emmett Till's death.
It's true. It's true that people are still racist, and again, I don't understand that mentality. I just don't have a way of grasping it. But it sure
Yep.
is a real thing. All right then.
Yeah, I think we've covered a good lot.
I think so too.
Yep.
Anything else to add?
I don't think so.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.